There have been many bloody revolutions throughout English history. These uprisings or takeovers usually resulted in much loss of life, frequently of the common people who had little to say in the politics behind the wars. So how does a bloodless revolution work exactly? The Bloodless Revolution, also known as the Glorious Revolution, was, on its face, a religious-based ousting of the monarch. However, the revolution also had political implications that would change the power structure of the English monarchy. The roots of the revolution formed during the reign of Charles I, who believed in the divine right of kings, a view he had inherited from his father, James I. Charles clashed with Parliament over the war with Spain, religious issues, and Parliament's distrust of his advisor, the first Duke of Buckingham. Buckingham held sway over the new king as he had over James I. So Charles dissolved Parliament and ruled for 11 years without it. This clash of king and Parliament eventually led to civil war. Charles was executed in 1649, with Oliver Cromwell proclaiming the Commonwealth. Despite Charles's son, Charles II, invading England in 1651 in an attempt to reinstate the monarchy, England remained a republic until 1660, 2 years after Cromwell had died. His son and successor, Richard, had failed to replicate his leadership. England fell into political turmoil and was essentially under military rule. After a while, people started to think back to the good old days with a proper government, when a hereditary monarch led Parliament. In talks with Charles II, the politicians were assured that if he were to come back as king, he would submit to the decisions of Parliament. And so, in May 1660, Charles was invited to reclaim the throne of England. Charles II was very popular and named the Merry Monarch for his hedonistic ways. He fathered many illegitimate children, 14 of which he recognized, but he did not produce a legitimate heir. Upon his death in 1685, the throne went to his more sober and conventional brother, James II. Around 1668, James had converted to Catholicism and publicly committed to the religion when he resigned his offices rather than take an anti-Catholic oath under the Test Act of 1673. He further offended the predominantly Protestant nation when he married Mary of Modena, a Roman Catholic princess. In 1678, further religious hysteria had led to the general belief of a fabricated tale, known as the Popish Plot, to assassinate King Charles II and put James on the throne. James had spent some years of his brother's reign in exile as 3 parliaments had tried to have him excluded from the succession. Upon Charles's death, the realization that a Catholic would take the throne caused general alarm amongst the common people. The anti-Catholic sentiment was founded on the fear that the Pope would make England a vassal state again, reimposing secular power and religious authority over the country. However, James came to power with little opposition due to his formal manner and previous support of the Anglicans. He assembled a new royalist parliament in 1685, and all hoped he would soon be accepted despite his religious beliefs. But cracks began to show just a few months after his ascension. Over the summer, the Dukes of Monmouth and Argyll led unsuccessful rebellions against the new king. James grew increasingly suspicious of his subjects, expanded the army, and gave new regiments to trusted Roman Catholic officers. By November, he had postponed Parliament, and the divide between the king and the Anglican Tories, his former allies, deepened throughout the next year. James set about replacing members of the party, and he gained the power to excuse individuals from the test oath. Roman Catholic officials were appointed to the Privy Council and other high positions. Throughout 1687, he continued to displace Anglicans and replace them with Catholics. Despite his political preference for Catholics, his public policies were mainly in favor of religious tolerance. In April 1687, he suspended laws against dissenters of both Catholicism and Protestantism. However, he still clashed with the Protestants that held power, so he dissolved Parliament and set about trying to establish a new one that would be more agreeable to him. From then on, James seemed torn between acceptance of different religious practices and wanting to establish Roman Catholicism as the dominant English religion. In November 1687, news broke that the Queen was pregnant, which meant a strong possibility of a Catholic succession. James already had children from his previous scandalous marriage to Anne Hyde. Despite being the reason James had converted to Catholicism, Anne had raised her children to be Protestant on the insistence of Charles I. Only 2 children from this marriage survived, Mary, the eldest, and Anne. Mary had married William, a Dutch royal prince of the House of Orange. With the prospect of a continued Catholic monarchy should Queen Mary have a boy, several English leaders stayed in touch with William of Orange as a prospective contender to the English throne. In 1688, two decisive events took place. One was the trial of several Protestant bishops, and the other was the birth of James's son. In April, James reissued his Declaration of Indulgence, and in May, he ordered it was to be read aloud in churches. This decree caused 7 bishops, including the Archbishop of Canterbury, to petition for the withdrawal of this order. Their petition was published, and James attempted to prosecute them for seditious libel. On June 10th, the worst fears of the English Protestant leaders came true, and Queen Mary gave birth to a boy, James Francis Edward. The boy had arrived earlier than expected, and perhaps due to the untimely deaths of her 5 previous children and the premature delivery, rumors circulated that the baby was not actually hers. Instead, it was claimed that the baby was an impostor, slipped into the Queen's bed via a warming pan, whose sole purpose was to secure a Roman Catholic succession. This claim would follow the young James throughout his life, later earning him the moniker the Old Pretender. The same month that Prince James was born, the 7 bishops who had petitioned James II were acquitted. On the same day, June 30th, 7 leading English nobles wrote to William of Orange, inviting him to bring an army to England to call a free parliament to pass judgment on the legitimacy of the newborn prince. They were spurred on not only by the birth of the healthy Catholic prince, but also by the belief that James planned to repeal the Test Act altogether, allowing for more Catholics in high positions. William himself was by no means surprised or humbled by the invitation. He had, in fact, already started to prepare for an invasion of England before the letter was sent. The formal invitation was primarily used for propaganda purposes. It allowed William to enter England under the pretense of a mercy mission intended to free England from Catholic succession. William's reasons for the invasion were purely self-serving. He hoped that calling a free parliament would ensure England's support in his ongoing war with Louis XIV. He amassed a vast invasion force of 21,000 soldiers, carried by 400 flyboats, 43 men of war, 10 fireships, and 4 light frigates. William landed in Tor Bay, Brixham, in November 1688. Supposedly aided by a Protestant wind that prevented King James's navy from intercepting the fleet at sea, news of William's arrival sparked anti-Catholic rioting throughout the country. James, who had been aware of William's intentions, had already made military preparations and had an army of 25,000 men encamped on Hounslow Heath. England was facing a civil war. James, unnerved by the civil unrest, decided to leave London and take his forces to meet William's army rather than wait for them to arrive. However, unbeknownst to the king, many of the people he assumed would be loyal to him were actually sympathetic to the Orangist cause. Lord Cornbury, James's nephew, was the first to defect. More joined the invading army as William and his men marched across the country. James had arrived in Salisbury on November 19th, intending to wait for the advancing army there. However, seeing his allies desert him, he decided to return to London. The final betrayal came when his daughter Anne and her husband, the Prince of Denmark, decided to support William instead of him. Seeing defeat was unavoidable, James announced that he was willing to call a free parliament as William had demanded. However, remembering that his father had been beheaded due to political unrest, James believed his life was in danger and started preparing to flee the country. Meanwhile, William's advance was not wholly unopposed. The invading army met with some resistance at Reading on December 9th, although there were few casualties. 2 days later, James attempted to escape the country amid more anti-Catholic rioting in the capital, but was soon captured by Kent fishermen. James's capture proved inconvenient for William. After all, James was William's father-in-law, but also, should he be put to death, William risked making James a Catholic martyr. On December 23rd, James successfully fled to France with William's assistance. William was then asked to summon a parliament, which met on January 22, 1689. It was agreed that they would treat James's abscondment as an abdication, and the crown would go to his successor. William pressured Parliament to allow him to rule as joint monarch with Mary rather than act as the Queen's consort, and the couple was officially crowned on April 11th. However, before they were given the crown, Mary and William were asked to sign a document that would profoundly affect the English monarchy. The Declaration of Rights, later made law as the Bill of Rights, protected the authority of Parliament and limited the monarchy's power. Amongst other things, it prohibited taxation without parliamentary consent and extolled the need for regular parliaments. In reality, it did not place any restrictions on the Crown's power, but it was another step toward a constitutional monarchy. Parliament did gain control over taxation, royal succession, and the monarch's right to wage war independently. In exchange, William was granted financial support for his war against France, for which he was more than willing to waive some of the royal rights. However, not everyone benefited from the outcome of the so-called Glorious Revolution. The Catholic-Protestant divide deepened in Ireland. The Irish Protestants disregarded a peace treaty made in 1691 and monopolized political and economic power. In Scotland, clansmen of Glencoe were massacred for not taking an oath of allegiance to William quick enough, and Scotland remained unsettled for the rest of William's reign. The Bill of Rights did nothing to limit the power of Parliament and did not protect constitutional law. The Revolution also led to growth in the slave trade, as it ended the Royal African Company's monopoly. For black citizens of the British Atlantic Empire, the Revolution resulted in the expansion of their servitude. The glorious and bloodless Revolution of 1688 to 1689 was not entirely bloodless and was not all that glorious. As with any other revolution, the leading cause was a power struggle of the upper classes, although this revolution won the support of the common people through rumors that played on their suspicion of Catholicism. While William was not very popular with the ruling classes, the people of England viewed him as a Protestant hero, proving that the propaganda had really worked. To learn more about the Bloodless Revolution, check out our book, History of England, a captivating guide to English history, starting from antiquity through the rule of the Anglo-Saxons, Vikings, Normans, and Tudors to the end of World War II. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Also, grab your free mythology bundle ebook while it's still available. All links are in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.